Hello and welcome to the EngagedBrain podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by QuantaBox. Each month, QuantaBox sends you science and neuroscience-related schwag. You can choose among various Quanta delivery schedules from alpha, beta, theta, depending on how much or how long you want your QuantaBox. If you don't want something in your QuantaBox, send it back to the competitive antagonist box. QuantaBox, just the right key for your lock of science interests. Mention EngagedBrain and receive your first month free. Music seems to be one of the oldest and most fundamental actions of human beings. Music plays a part in almost every important function or gathering that we take part in across our lives, from celebrations to graduations to weddings and finally funerals. Music doesn't just happen in isolation, though. It can be used to affect us in many ways. Today I speak with Heather Robinson about music and the brain. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm here with Heather Robinson talking about music and the brain.
Thank you.
And can you tell me why you got interested in music?
Yeah, I started playing the piano in second grade, and then ever since then, music has been like a huge part of my life. I started dancing at the age of 5, and then I also started playing the flute in high school mostly. So music has really been like a huge influence on me.
Yeah, and have you continued playing piano and flute here at Haverford?
Not quite. I've been trying to start up playing the flute again, but I'm mostly involved with dance. I'm going to be a dance minor at Bryn Mawr, hopefully.
Yeah, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I was on and off musician, played piano growing up, and then played the trombone in middle school. Quit because I wanted to play guitar, and they didn't have
it's
that option. Yeah, so then I played guitar in high school and dropped it kind of since I graduated college, but hopefully trying to get back to it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and how about in terms of music and the brain, what have been some interesting things that you found in your research so far?
There was one study done where people were asked to rate 4 different songs on a scale of like happy to sad, and each one varied. They were either fast or slow, or a major or minor. And they found that people would rate the slower songs as the saddest rather than the minor songs.
Okay.
And like as a musician, you would think that people would rate the minor songs as sad because that's kind of what you're trained to think. And then when they looked at the brain, they also found that there were more parts of the brain activated when they listened to the minor songs rather than the slow songs, but they still rated the slow songs as the saddest. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Any other interesting studies?
There was one also that listening to happy music can stimulate the reward centers in your brain. So it activates the ventral and dorsal striatum, which are involved with reward experience. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and was that like, did they have a particular type of music, or was it happy to the particular person? So like, I like classic rock a lot, so does listening to classic rock make me happy, or is there just like a fundamental type of happy music?
I think it was the fundamental type of happy music. They controlled for that, I guess.
Yeah. My wife had an interesting study. They were looking at satiation. So people came in and they asked them, like, what's your favorite kind of music, or what's your favorite song from this list of songs? And then they'd choose a song. I can't remember. One was like Katy Perry Fireworks or something like that. And so you'd like listen to it, and the first time you'd be like all happy, and then you listen to it 10 more times, and like after every time they'd rate you like how much you like the song. And some people you'd just see like they loved Firework, and then by the 10th time they're like, it's not that great anymore. So I think it's funny to see how your appreciation of music changes over time.
Oh yeah.
But so going to another topic, are there any aspects of music and the brain that might be confusing to the public?
I think that anything that has to do with specific parts of the brain can be confusing. Like I showed my article to my grandma, and she was reading through it. Like she has a college experience, but she never did anything with neuroscience. And then she got to the word anterior cingulate cortex, and then in parentheses was ACC. And she was like, "Thank goodness for the abbreviation." I think anything to do with like specific parts of the brain that aren't like left or right or front or back can be really confusing.
Yeah, and so you talked about the striatum. I can't remember if we said any other words, but other parts of the brain that are involved in music.
Yeah, the ACC is a part of that. There's also some hemispheric lateralization that has to do with music. Like I think negative emotions are sometimes processed more in the right side of the brain rather than the left side of the brain, which is a little bit easier to understand, but then the research articles would go into like what parts of the right side and the left side, which is very confusing.
Yeah, and as long as we're talking about emotion, then it's like, amygdala, ACC, hippocampus.
Amygdala is in there too, yeah.
Yeah, so now we're like talking about most of the brain being involved in music. And you mentioned your article on BuzzFeed, which was 10 things you probably didn't know about music and your brain. What's been the response to your BuzzFeed article?
I think a lot of people don't find it super interesting. I think out of the 10, they might find like 1 or 2 kind of interesting, but overall there aren't like really attention-grabbing research articles.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to hype it up to the point where it's kind of like false, like borderline false. So I tried to keep it as true to the articles as I could, but I think because of that, it's not like super interesting. So I've gotten like a huge feedback from it.
Were you able to tell how many people have like looked at it or anything?
Yeah, I think the total is like 11.
Okay, I've definitely looked at it more than 11
Thank
times.
you.
But so, how about with your research? Do you think that there's any new directions that music in the brain is going?
Yeah, there was one article I looked at which focused on the amygdala, so music had an effect on it, which is important for emotional processing. And then they also mentioned in the conclusion that dysfunction in the amygdala has been linked to depression and anxiety, which gives scientific support to music therapy, which is really interesting, and I think that would be really important to learn more about, but I haven't found like a lot of research on music therapy and the benefits of music therapy.
Yeah, we were talking earlier kind of like how we use music to affect us. So we like use it to guide our emotions in a certain way, or like you were saying that you've been stressed, so you've been listening to smooth jazz, which will be the musical interlude for the podcast. But is it because music's affecting different parts of the brain that we can use it to kind of put us in different moods or in different places?
I think so. There isn't like a whole lot of research on it, but I think that listening to music can affect you, and so that can be something to alleviate maybe the symptoms of depression or anxiety.
Yeah, so you mentioned that slow songs were rated as the sadder ones, so like maybe listening to faster songs, or I'm not sure, major fast songs, major key fast songs might be the happiest music that we could use as kind of like a pairing with therapy.
Or even if if you're like struggling with some sad emotions, maybe listening to sad music can help you process those emotions. That's just my own speculation, though.
Yeah, that sometimes you want to like wallow in the sadness,
and then afterwards you feel better.
Yeah. There's a Pearl Jam song, "Black," that I like to listen to when I'm sad, and it's definitely a sad song. So I can see that. How about, is there one really important thing that you want everyone to know about music in the brain?
I think overall just the fact that music has an important connection to emotions, because I personally came from a public school, so whenever there was like, they were tight for money, it would always be the music and the arts programs that go first. And I think in our society we don't view music and other art forms as important as we should, and I think that viewing them as more important would, or like researching them and finding out that they have an emotional significance would make them more important.
Yeah, and since we're talking about emotion like affecting people in different ways, have you come across any research on like music and creativity, or music and like cognitive thinking?
Not yet.
Okay, I bet there's something out there that not necessarily like listening to music while you're working on your homework or something is good for you. I think most people say it's bad for you. But that being a musician and kind of like interacting with music and everything in one way can help you kind of think more broadly about things, and I think it probably helps with like spatial awareness and other things that might help with things down the line.
It'd be really important to integrate that into schools, I think.
Yeah, so maybe look elsewhere than the arts and creative outlets for cutting things from the day. Like standardized testing, I think would be mine. And then I think maybe, do you have any other kind of big things that take-home points or interesting research studies? I
think that was it.
Okay. Yeah, so the importance of music and emotion and creativity, yeah. So turning to wrap up the podcast, is there something that you'd like to promote?
Yes, I am part of the Bounce Dance Group, and we have a show on April 16th. Please come. It would be super fun, and I actually am choreographing a piece for that.
Oh,
so
great.
I'll be showcasing my very first choreography.
Oh, that's awesome. And do you know where that will be, the showcase?
It should be in Marshall Auditorium.
Okay. And the time of the day?
I want to say 7-ish, 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Okay. Well, that sounds great. And then the last thing I'll ask you, a fad or product that you'd like others to know about?
If you go on theelephantpants.com, they have a bunch of different products, and every time you buy like a pair of pants or a bag or something, they donate $1 or $2 to help save poached elephants or help keep them from being poached. And it's a really nice website.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I know elephants are sometimes associated with memory. Maybe we can associate them with music too. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Heather for coming in and telling me about music in the brain. Such an interesting discussion. Also fun to hear from a musician themselves. So wrapping up the show, I have just a couple of things left. First, Jake's Jams, things I've been interested in lately. This time, nothing scholarly, but I've been really enjoying Amazon Prime, getting the $100 a year for 2-day shipping, and in Philadelphia, actually, sometimes 1-day shipping, but also a number of other things like having access to movies and TV shows, which have been fun and interesting to watch. Also listening to music and other things, but Amazon Prime has been, I think, a great investment for this first year that I've tried it. Now moving to a new segment in the show, something called Scholar Notifications. So every so often I'll check Feedly, where I get RSS feeds from a number of different journals that I'm interested in, but also checking Google Scholar. I'll get notifications based on my citations. And since we're talking about music in the brain, I wanted to throw a shout out to my close friend, Amy Belfi, who's a postdoctoral fellow at NYU currently. And I saw that she recently had 2 citations in 2015 about music in the brain that I thought I'd bring up in the show. The first one, neurological damage disrupts normal sex differences in psychophysiological responsiveness to music in the journal Psychophysiology. And in this experiment, participants listened to music, an emotional stimulus that reliably elicits skin conductance responses, or SCRs. And so they were recording activity while the participants listened to musical clips. And then when analyzing the data without regard to sex, there was no differences across the healthy participants and individuals with brain damage. However, when they looked at brain injury status and sex, they found a significant interaction, where for men, brain damage significantly reduced SCRs, but for women, there was no difference. And these findings illustrate the importance of looking at demographic variables like sex when investigating brain behavior relationships, especially when it's something like measuring psychophysiological dependent variable. So that was neurological damage disrupts normal sex differences in psychophysiological responsiveness to music in the Journal of Psychophysiology with the first author, Belfi. And then the other one that more closely aligned with my interests, was music evokes vivid autobiographical memories in the journal Memory. And in this report, they looked at different cues to elicit autobiographical memories. And they found that musical evoked autobiographical memories were more vivid than autobiographical memories evoked by faces. So they played music and showed faces from particular time periods and asked if those cues had brought up any memories for the people. And they found that these memes, or the memory-evoked autobiographical memories, contained a greater proportion of internal details, meaning that they were more episodic. They had things like events that they were describing, people, places, feelings, and perceptual details like things they saw or heard. And with these greater perceptual details, they were much more vivid than the face-evoked memories. Excuse me, which contained a greater number of external details, things like semantic details like facts, other details like metacognitive statements or reasoning about the memories currently, and repetitions, so repeating the same thing over and over. So that's a new segment in the show, Scholar Notifications. And with the topic, I thought I'd give a shout out to Amy Belfi, a close friend of mine from graduate school. And so to wrap up the show, we'll turn to the mailbag, reader mail, Twitter tweets, Nothing so far, but you can tweet me at EngagedBrain on Twitter or email me at my last name at gmail.com. So thank you, and we'll talk soon.